One mosquito can wreck your whole night. Medieval peasants slept like babies beneath swarms of them in the open. And their forgotten playbook flips what we assume on its head. Start with smoke. Not cozy campfire smoke, the thick, eye-stinging kind. They burned damp wood, wet leaves, anything that coughed out the heaviest plume. Survival, not ambience. And they were precise about it. Fires upwind of sleeping spots so the drift rolled right over their beds like a protective cloud. Call it medieval air conditioning. Only your filter is wood. Sounds miserable. Modern tests back them up. Smoke in the open can cut mosquito landings by over 50%. The sharp operators went further, tossing mugwort, juniper, and rosemary into the coals. Those fumes were brutal on insects. Picture a 10-foot keep-out line. Mugwort, especially strong enough to make a bull blink. Never mind a midge. Bonus efficiency. Cooking fires pulled double duty. One blaze for stew and defense. Sleep without the midnight slap fight. Wake up smelling like a chimney but not covered in welts. Fair trade. But smoke wasn't the only trick. You can't just hide. You have to confuse. Peasants carpeted their bedding with lavender, mint, and other nose-punch herbs. Not to smell pretty, but to scramble a bug's guidance system. Mosquitoes track carbon dioxide and body odor, flood the air with pungent plants and their GPS glitches. Some even stuffed wormwood or tansy directly into mattresses. Does wormwood smell great? Absolutely not. More like bitter herbs and old socks. But a few hours of funky sleep beat a night of stings. And this wasn't superstition. Lavender carries linalool and camphor. Mint brings menthol. Real chemical pushback. Monks wrote it down. A 12th century English manuscript spells out equal parts dried mint and crushed juniper berries mixed into straw bedding every 3 days. The clever twist was portability. Weave the plants into rush mats, roll up sleeping bags with built-in repellent. Side perks stacked up. Lavender soothed nerves. Mint cleared noses. Wormwood chased off fleas and lice. Multitasking before the term existed. Still, plants could only do so much if you picked the wrong spot. Location mattered more than most of us realize. Mosquitoes love standing water, the way teens love their phones. Ponds, puddles, marshes, the 5-star nurseries. So peasants simply walked away from water. Then they got strategic. Wind is a mosquito's enemy. High ground meant a steady draft, and anything above 8 miles per hour turns them into flying disasters. No apps, no gauges, just pat. Tall grass, romantic on film. A bug hostile in summer. They avoided sleeping against thick vegetation. And here's the sneaky genius. Livestock decoys. Cows, pigs, horses exhale far more carbon dioxide and push more heat than a human. Park your bed a stone's throw from the byre and let the herd attract the heat-seeking missiles. Even basic shelter helped. Lean-tos and overhangs blocked approach angles and cut down air currents where bites happen. Many families moved seasonally. Higher, breezier perches during peak months. Closer to water again when the chill returned. The results were real. Modern measurements show that shifting a bed just 50 feet away from standing water can slash encounters by over 70%. They stumbled into good science by living with the land. Then they solved a ground problem. Sleep on dirt and you share the night with every crawler. Ants, beetles, spiders and mosquitoes skimming the still, humid layer right above the earth. The answer was elevation. Scrap timber, fallen logs, stacked stones, anything to lift a platform. 12 inches made a world of difference. Air moves more freely up there. Bugs can't hover as is. Straw or dried grass on top turned a plank pile into a mattress and added a barrier insects struggled to cross. Communal platforms saved wood and kept everyone together. Fast to build, easy to shift with the seasons. Upsides kept piling up. Warmer, drier than the damp ground. Fewer rodents climbing on, and you can sit up to swat without flailing in mud. Clothing finished the perimeter. Think loose linen, not tight tees. Baggy fabric that covers everything and hangs away from skin as armor. Mosquitoes need contact to bite. Space ruins their angle. Layers were normal old. Cloaks wrapped around calves and forearms. Wool blankets tucked and twisted until no skin peeked through. Head coverings were non-negotiable. Faces and necks are prime targets. Some people went full wrap, leaving just small gaps to breathe. Socks and mittens did double duty. Warmth and no scratching rules. You can't cheat in your sleep. Didn't matter if you were rich or broke. Fine cloth or patched scraps. The principle held. Even in hot regions, heavy coverage beat bare skin during mosquito season. Sweat now or scratch all night. And the effectiveness. Modern studies put long sleeves and pants at reducing bites by over 90% compared to bare arms and legs. They learned it the hard way and kept a habit. Then came the crowd tactic. Overwhelmed the hunter. Mosquitoes struggled to lock onto one target when scent plumes, heat signatures, and shifting bodies overlap. Families piled 6, 7, 8 people onto one raised platform. Grandparents, parents, kids, sometimes a cousin who needed a spot. Fabric was expensive, so blankets were shared. Vulnerable sleepers got the middle, children and elders ringed by adults who could swat. Constant micro-movements, strolling over, tugging covers. Whispering kept landing attempts off balance. Sound helped, too. Low chatter, soft snores. The occasional complaint about elbows created vibrations that nudged insects off their approach. Warmer together meant fewer gaps at the ankles and wrists, fewer entry points overall. Some villages scaled this to the neighborhood. 20 or 30 people in one space during peak season. Chaos for a mosquito, relief for everyone else. Sleep itself got re-engineered. Who said it has to be one long stretch? Peasants carved the night into segments. 3 hours down, a natural wake period, then doze again. Less time lying motionless equals fewer easy targets. During wake windows they stoked fires, tossed more herbs on, or relocated if the wind shifted. Mini naps became tools to unended bursts with a smoldering lavender or mint bundle nearby. Just enough rest without giving insects a full runway. Summer's worst weeks shifted everything outdoors after the heat broke, riding the temperature drop into the mosquito uncomfort zone. Locations rotated like a village dance barn tonight. Hill tomorrow, back inside if weather turned. Some people micro-slept in 15-minute pulses while tending embers or watching animals, and they ran it like a neighborhood watch. Someone was always awake. Feeding communal smoke fires that sheltered multiple households. Breezy nights, take the long rest. Calm and humid, keep it short and vigilant. It worked because daily life allowed flex. No alarms, no factory whistle, just rhythms tuned to the season. And then the strangest adaptation. The body adjusted. After years of nightly bites, immune systems stopped throwing tantrums. The swelling faded, the itch dulled, and sleep returned. Chronic exposure near marshes shows up in old accounts, has fewer complaints, not fewer bugs. Adults developed thicker, roughened skin on hands and faces callous as accidental armor. Sometimes repeated bites left faint scarring that made surfaces less appealing to mosquitoes, which prefer smooth, easier skin. Children born in those places seemed to inherit part of that tolerance. Whole wetland villages looked. In practice, mosquitoism. The mind followed the body. Once the sting stopped screaming, people learned to ignore it. Modern observations echo it. Folks living long-term in heavy mosquito zones show lower inflammatory responses than short-term visitors. The big lesson: humans adapt. With smoke and herbs, smarter campsites and higher beds, layered cloth and crowded platforms, segmented rest and watchful fires, and, over time, skin and nerves that stopped overreacting, medieval peasants outmaneuvered the night's tiniest tormentors and actually slept. Even the smartest peasants couldn't win every night. Some summers were so humid that the air itself seemed to buzz. That's when experience turned into discipline. Every village had its own rhythm, fires lit at dusk. Herbs refreshed before midnight. Bedding turned so the scent stayed sharp. It wasn't chaos. It was choreography. 100 small acts blending into one survival ritual that stretched from sunset to dawn. You can almost picture it. Silhouettes moving through violet smoke, sparks drifting into a star-heavy sky, someone whispering a prayer while stamping down embers near the haystacks. The smoke curled low over sleeping fields, a slow-moving veil, drifting through rye and barley. Crickets sang. Livestock shifted and snorted in their pens, pulling mosquitoes away from the human clusters a few yards uphill. The rhythm of the night became a kind of shared heartbeat, hiss of damp wood, sigh of wind, murmur of breath. And in that pattern, people found rest. Sleep wasn't absence. It was strategy. By late summer, the smell of herbs clung to everything. Clothes, hair, even the timber beams inside cottages. Children grew up associating lavender with safety, mugwort with comfort. Parents passed on, not just recipes, but reflexes: how to tell when the air was too still, when to move camp, when to thicken the fire smoke. Entire generations became meteorologists of instinct, reading the sky by scent and sound. When autumn came, mosquitoes vanished almost overnight. Peasants joked that the wind carried them off to bother the nobles instead. Relief swept through the villages like a holiday. People slept longer, deeper, but they didn't dismantle the habits that had saved them. The smoky fires still burned low outside huts, partly for warmth, partly from superstition, partly because the smell now meant home. Winter brought other torments. Cold that bit harder than any insect, but By then the peasant body had earned a strange resilience. Scarred skin, hardened lungs, steady nerves. The nightly battles against mosquitoes had trained them for endurance, without them even realizing it. Each summer returned like a test. They already knew how to pass. Centuries later, when towns grew larger and peasants moved indoors, the old smoke rituals faded. Herbal bedding turned into linen sheets. Rush mats became straw mattresses. And the nightly symphony of crackling fires fell silent. But traces of that knowledge survived in whispers. The lavender sachet in a grandmother's drawer. The mint tea brewed before bed. The instinct to light a little fire when the air feels too still. What began as desperation turned into quiet genius. They didn't have repellent spray, mosquito nets, or science, but they had observation, rhythm, and persistence. Night after night, they taught themselves the oldest lesson there is. Survival isn't about winning once. It's about enduring long enough to wake up tomorrow. By spring, when the first warm rains returned, every village began its quiet preparations for another siege. Smoke pits repaired, herb bundles tied and hung near doors. Even children helped, stuffing mint and tansy into cloth pouches, like tiny soldiers packing ammunition. They knew what was coming, the soft hum that meant sleepless nights were near, and no one underestimated it. To us, mosquitoes are an irritation. To them, they were a force of nature, as relentless as hunger or frost. One infected bite could fester for weeks. Fever spread fast in crowded huts, where medicine was little more than prayer. The peasants learned the value of vigilance long before anyone understood infection. Their nightly fires didn't just drive off insects. They cleansed the air. The same smoke that choked their lungs probably saved countless lives. You can imagine it. Twilight settling over a thatched hamlet. Smoke rising from dozens of small fires, drifting through cottages and over the pasture. The village glowed faintly in the dusk, a constellation of orange embers against the gray. Chickens clucked softly under wooden lientus. Cows shifted in their pens. And people began their slow retreat into another night's ritual. Every movement had a purpose: where to place the fire, how to stack the wood so the wind caught just right, how to keep the smoke dense but steady. There was an artistry to it, passed down like a song. A well-made smoke fire didn't roar, it breathed. Damp twigs at the base, slow-burning leaves above, a thin crust of ash to keep embers smoldering till morning. Grandmothers knew the recipes, by scent alone. Too sharp and you'd choke, too mild and you'd wake covered in bites. Some even blended herbs the way apothecaries mix perfume, experimenting to find which combinations the night hated most. Beyond the science of survival was something quieter: community. When families slept close together on raised platforms, with shared blankets and shared air, they also shared trust. Those cramped sleeping spaces turned into the heartbeat of the medieval household. Stories told in whispers, songs hummed between swats, laughter over who snored loudest, it all blended into the rhythm of endurance. The night was their enemy, but it was also when they remembered they weren't alone. By the time dawn broke, smoke clung to everything: hair, fabric, even skin. The scent was harsh, yes, but to them it smelled like victory. The first light slipped through the mist, catching faces streaked with soot, eyes half closed but peaceful. They had made it through another night, without surrendering to the buzzing dark. These peasants didn't write books or invent machines, but they understood systems: the relationship between wind and water, between scent and safety. Their methods were messy, improvised, but astonishingly effective. In a world without technology, their greatest tool was observation. They watched, they remembered, they adapted. And maybe that's the part we've forgotten. Survival isn't always loud or heroic. Sometimes it's a quiet fire burning under a smoky sky, a family huddled together in the dark, doing everything they can to sleep through the danger. By the time Europe stumbled into the high Middle Ages, that smoky, sleepless knowledge had already reshaped how peasants thought about health itself. What began as a defense against mosquitoes slowly evolved into something broader, a philosophy of purity through balance. They learned, without ever naming it, that the same habits that kept bugs away also kept sickness at bay. Smoke cleansed the air, herbs steadied the mind, fire kept the damp rot from creeping in. Every cottage became its own experiment in equilibrium. The hearth wasn't just a cooking pit, it was medicine, guardian, and timekeeper. At dusk, when the last field hands returned from the barley rows, smoke already curled through open doorways, perfumed with rosemary or sage. In that hazy air, you could smell safety. Children slept better in those houses. The coughing that haunted wet seasons came less often. People couldn't explain it, but they trusted what worked. Monks took notice first. In monasteries scattered across England and France, The brothers observed that smoke and certain plants reduced the fevers that swept through their dormitories each summer. They began keeping meticulous notes, which herbs burned clean, which choked the lungs, which kept insects away longest. Over time, those records turned into early herbal compendiums, the ancestors of modern pharmacology, and somewhere in the margins of those manuscripts, you can almost hear the echo of a peasant's common sense. Burn the strong herbs before sleep, let the smoke drift low. The same logic spread to fields and barns. Farmers discovered that smokehouses, built originally for drying meat, also protected grain and hay from infestation. They lined their walls with herbs once reserved for the bedside, mint, juniper, wormwood, and watched how fewer weevils nested in the stored grain. Without realizing it, they'd invented a form of pest control, centuries ahead of its time. Even architecture changed. Homes began to rise slightly higher off the ground, mimicking those first sleeping platforms. Raised floors meant better airflow, fewer insects, less damp. In flood-prone regions, entire hamlets perched their cottages on stone bases, half health measure, half engineering marvel. The lessons of one smoky night had turned into a way of building the world, and as the villages grew, so did the rituals. The summer smoke nights became community events, people lighting their fires together, singing old warding songs while the air shimmered with ember. Some believed the smoke carried prayers upward. Others just knew it kept the air moving. But either way, it bound them. You could walk from one edge of a village to the other and never lose sight of a thin thread of blue-gray haze, stretching from roof to roof like a shared heartbeat. By the 13th century, even nobles had adopted their own version of these habits. Gardens and manors included sleep herbs like lavender, pennyroyal, and sweet basil, more fashion than necessity, but born from peasant wisdom nonetheless. Stone hearths burned low at night, filling corridors with the same protective scent once found in humble cottages. The difference was only in polish. What the poor discovered through need, the wealthy refined into ritual. And yet, beneath all the elegance and ceremony, the core truth never changed. A civilization that learned to survive nights thick with mosquitoes also learned how to face the unknown with patience. Fire and smoke became more than tools. They were symbols of endurance, of human cleverness in the face of the small and merciless. By the time morning light spread across a field still wrapped in fading mist, the fires burned low, their work done. Children stirred. Adults rose to tend animals and crops. The air was quiet again, heavy with dew, empty of wings. In that moment between night and day, survival didn't look like victory. It looked like peace. By the late Middle Ages, smoke had become more than a defense. It was part of the landscape itself. Villagers viewed it as both shield and spirit, a quiet reminder that life was won each night, not given. The peasants who once huddled under smoky blankets had unknowingly built the foundation of medieval environmental science. They didn't use the word ecology, but they understood its pulse. They noticed how certain herbs grew thicker near clean water, and how mosquitoes bred less where sheep grazed the grass short. They mapped the movement of wind through valleys the way we track weather patterns today. These weren't ignorant laborers fumbling in darkness. They were living sensors, reading the whispers of the earth through habit and hardship. Monastic scholars, gathering wisdom from farmers and travelers alike, began recording these patterns. In dim scriptoria, lit by tallow candles, monks copied lists of smoke herbs, noting that rosemary thrived on coastal winds, that mugwort grew strongest in the shade, that wormwood kept flies from meat stores. These small insights, born from survival, became written knowledge, something rare and sacred in a world where most truth was passed by word of mouth. Meanwhile, in the villages, summer preparations became almost ceremonial. Each year, as days lengthened, families rebuilt their smoke pits, checked their sleeping platforms, and dried bundles of mint and juniper in attic beams. The first night they lit the fires was marked by laughter, gossip, and relief, a ritual of readiness. Children teased each other with handfuls of herbs, pretending to ward off invisible swarms. The air filled with thick blue haze, and the season of vigilance began again. It's easy to romanticize it now. The firelight, the songs, the scent of earth and smoke. But for them, it wasn't beauty. It was necessity, wrapped in grace. Every fire that burned through the night was a statement. We will live. And that declaration, repeated in thousands of humble cottages across centuries, built a resilience that carried through plagues, wars, and winters. Even when Europe's great cities rose, London, Paris, Florence and stone replaced timber, echoes of those smoky villages remained. Chimneys curled their black ribbons into grey skies. Streets still smelled faintly of burning wood and herbs. In a strange way, humanity never stopped surrounding itself with smoke, from hearths to factories, to candles and incense, as if some ancient memory told us it keeps the dark at bay. Modern science would eventually prove what the peasants knew by instinct, that smoke confuses the senses of mosquitoes, that herbal oils block receptors, that air movement matters more than repellents. But numbers and graphs can't capture what their nights truly meant. They weren't running experiments. They were living through them, and each discovery was etched in sweat, soot, and scars. Imagine that moment just before dawn, a field glimmering with dew, the fires fading to orange coals, cows lowing softly, and a single wisp of lavender smoke rising straight into the pale sky. The world smells like ash and mint, and for the first time in hours, it's quiet. The insects are gone. The people breathe easy. The battle is over until night falls again. That was the rhythm of medieval life: hardship and adaptation, loss and endurance, 1,000 small victories against an endless tide of nature. Theirs was not a story of conquest, but of coexistence, of learning to live with the buzzing, biting world instead of trying to destroy it. And in that balance, the dance between fire and air, smoke and silence, lies a truth as old as humanity itself. Survival isn't born from power, but from understanding. The peasants didn't outfight the world. They outlearned it.